Kaimin Jai Shalal was born around 60 BBY on the tropical planet Kaleesh. The Kaleesh were a red-skinned reptilian species whose entire culture revolved around religion and war. For generations, tribal wars had been a constant, as in the Kaleesh tradition, they believed that their achievements in battle could grant them a divine status in afterlife. However, at the time of Shalal's birth, the Kaleesh suffered under the oppression of the Huk, a technologically advanced insectoid species. The Huk raided Kaleesh, exploiting the Kaleesh people, enslaving them and selling them like tools on the black market. The young Shalal grew up with a deep-seated hatred for the Huk species and was trained by his father in marksmanship at a young age. The boy excelled, and by the age of 8, he had already slain over 40 Huk with his rifle. His reputation as a warrior grew rapidly, and by the age of 22, Shalal had killed so many Huk that the Kaleesh started to revere him as a demigod. But it wasn't just the amount of kills he was able to amount, but also his unmatched tactical intellect, making him one of the greatest Kaleesh war leaders of his time. When Shalal's father fell in battle, he left behind his Mumu skull mask for his son to inherit. That night, Shalal dreamed of hunting a Mumu, a boar native to Kaleesh, using twin lig swords. Upon walking out of this dream, he donned his father's mask and ventured into the jungle to fulfill the vision. Shortly after, Shalal came across Rondero Liege Kumar, a female Kaleesh swordswoman clad in a Karabakh skull mask wielding twin lig swords. Recognizing the significance of his dream, Shalal saw himself not as the hunter, but as the hunted, the one destined to be changed by this woman. Together, they became an unstoppable force against the Huk, feared across the battlefield. She strengthened his skill with blades while he trained her into a lethal sniper. As lovers and warriors, donning their symbolic masks, they became legends to the Kaleesh people. However, tragedy struck during a routine battle on the beaches of Kaleesh. The Huk managed to overwhelm the two warriors, separating them. Kumar was surrounded and slain by the Huk. Her body was disposed of in the endless sea. Shalal was devastated. Without a proper burial, her soul would be lost, denied her rightful place in the afterlife. He searched desperately, but her remains were never found. Overcome with grief, he made a journey that was said to be impossible to the monolithic island of Basli, the sacred site where Kaleesh gods were said to ascend to the heavens. There, he pleaded for the return of his beloved, but the gods remained silent. Defeated for the first time in his life, Shalal returned home, a man forever changed. He attempted to live a normal life, taking 10 wives and fathering 30 children, but his mind never strayed far from the injustice he had suffered. He was no longer Shalal, the dreamer and the dreamt one, as the shamans had called him. He was simply a grieving warrior. He rejected his name, embracing instead his sorrow, his torment, and donned the name Grievous. Fueled by vengeance, Grievous unified the fractured Kaleesh tribes and took command of their armies, declaring himself the supreme warlord. He formed the Izvoshra, an elite force of Kaleesh warrior who acted as his bodyguards and most capable warriors. Under his leadership, the Kaleesh turned the tide of war, finally pushing the Huk off-world and capturing their spaceships. With their newfound spaceships, they reached out to other alien species, acquiring further weaponry and technology. For the first time in history, the Kaleesh were no longer defending. No, now they were conquering. Grievous and his armies conquered entire Huk colonies, burning them to the ground, slaughtering their populations. The Huk Empire was collapsing. Victory was within Grievous's grasp. The Huk, unable to respond to Grievous's campaign, were desperate for a way to stop him. Having contacts and influence on the Republic Senate, they sought intervention from the Galactic Republic, portraying themselves as victims of the Kaleesh aggression. The Republic heard their plea and sent the Jedi to deal with the Kaleesh. When the Jedi arrived on the battlefield donning their lightsabers, the Kaleesh and Grievous were cut down and driven back, forced to retreat back to Kaleesh. In the aftermath, the Republic implemented severe sanctions and trade embargoes on Kaleesh, plunging the planet into poverty. Thousands of Kaleesh starved to death due to the Republic's intervention, fostering a deep-seated hatred of the Jedi within Grievous, seeing them as the reason for the suffering of his people. It was then that San Hill, chairman of the Intergalactic Banking Clan, approached Grievous. The same banks that funded the Republic now sought to hire the warlord as a commander for their private droid army. In exchange for his services as a collection agent, the banking clan would erase Kaleesh's debt and circumvent the trade embargo that way. Despite recognizing the irony of his situation, him being little more than a corporate enforcer, a slave to the banking clan, Grievous accepted the offer as in his mind, if he must enslave himself, it would be so that no Kaleesh would ever suffer enslavement again. True to their word, the banking clan restored Kaleesh's economy, removing its debts and reviving trade. Grievous, in turn, proved to be a ruthless and highly effective agent, leading collection efforts and reclaiming overdue credits. Yet, despite his success, he found himself longing for the camaraderie of his former life. He was forced to work with the banking clan's B-1 battle droids, mindless machines which he deemed unworthy to what it meant to be a warrior. He thus demanded more sophisticated replacements. He wanted his elite warriors, the Isvoshra, by his side, but the banking clan refused to employ other Kaleesh, fearing they might be too difficult to control. Instead, in order to keep Grievous content, Hill authorized the creation of the IG-100 Magna Guards. While he was at first disgusted by their mindless nature, he soon recognized that they had their uses and ordered their reprogramming. He made sure that they would observe him in battle and learn to fight just as his old Hux-slaying comrades once had. Under his command, the banking clan's military forces became one of the most feared in the galaxy. For a time, Grievous seemed content. He ensured the endless flow of credits into the vaults of the banking clan for the betterment of his own people. His people were prospering, and he was a hero to them. He seemed at peace at last. But of course, fate had other plans. Chapter 2. Transformation. While serving the banking clan, Grievous received devastating news. In an unthinkable act, the Huk had launched a fresh wave of attacks on Kaleesh, attempting to reclaim territory they had once occupied. In the chaos, they desecrated sacred burial grounds and temples of Kaleesh. Grievous was furious. The Huk had already enslaved and slaughtered his people in life, and now they sought to rob them of peace in the afterlife, and the Republic had done nothing to stop them. Enraged beyond reason, Grievous abandoned his contract with the banking clan's droid army. Kaleesh needed him, and he would answer. Rallying his Isvoshra once more, he prepared to launch a counteroffensive that would annihilate the Huk once and for all. Sand was placed in a difficult position. He could not allow such defiance to go unpunished, but Grievous was too valuable to simply eliminate. He reached out to Poggle the Lesser, Archduke of Geonosis, and together with Count Dooku, they devised a way to ensure the warriors' permanent servitude. Grievous soon arrived on Kaleesh and was anointed by a Kaleesh holy man, preparing for the renewed war. With his loyal Isvoshra at his side, he boarded his troop shuttle, Martyr, and set off to resume the battle against the Huk. But, unbeknownst to him, his supposed allies of the banking clan had sabotaged his journey. They had planted an ion bomb aboard the shuttle and rigged his pilot seat for remote ejection. As the Martyr soared above the Genoa Sea, the bomb detonated. The explosion tore through the ship, sending it spiraling into the waters below. At the last moment, Dooku activated the remote ejection, separating Grievous from the doomed vessel. His Isvoshra were not so lucky. All of them perished in the crash. Grievous survived, but he was gravely injured. Internal bleeding and shock left him barely clinging to life. As he drifted in and out of consciousness, Dooku arrived in person, using the arcane Sith heart stun technique to prevent his body from shutting down completely. It was in this vulnerable state that the Sith Lord whispered deception into his mind, telling him that the Jedi were responsible for the attack, that the Jedi, fearing his return, had struck first to protect their Huk allies. Grievous's broken body was retrieved by his Magna Guards, and then brought aboard a waiting shuttle. Inside, medical droids worked to stabilize him as they set course for Geonosis. He was transfused with the blood of Jedi Master Sifo Dyas to stabilize his body further. Upon arrival, Poggle the Lesser and his Geonosian scientists began their work. Grievous's eyes, brain, and spinal cord were extracted from his failing body and transferred into a duranium alloy warframe, inspired by the ancient Krath war droids. His remaining organs were sealed within a synth-skin gut sac, rendering him impervious to the vacuum of space. The modifications did not stop at his body, severing a lot of connections to his people and culture. His abilities were enhanced, his vision sharpened, his aggression heightened, and unbeknownst to him, a hidden kill switch was implanted under the control of Dooku. When Grievous awoke, he was in shock. Seeing the monster he had become, he lay there in anguish. Turning around, he saw Sand standing there. His body, Sand explained, had been destroyed in a Jedi attack, along with his Isvoshra. The banking clan had saved him, giving him a second chance at life. and now Hill wanted him to meet Count Dooku, the leader of a growing Separatist movement. Dooku made Grievous an offer, promising to destroy the Republic and the Jedi together. Fueled by a burning desire for vengeance against both the Republic and the Huk, Grievous agreed to join Dooku's cause. Dooku granted Grievous the title of Supreme Commander of the Droid armies and presented him with his first lightsaber, the weapon of Sifo-Dyas, the Jedi whose blood now flowed through his veins. Although the midichlorian-rich blood of Sifo-Dyas had sustained his life, it didn't grant him any sensitivity to the Force as they had hoped. Grievous's new form, the fusion of flesh and machine, filled him with disgust. The memories of his past life clawed at the edges of his mind. When Dooku referred to him as a droid, something inside him snapped. In a violent outburst, he slaughtered every IG-100 Magna Guard in the room, declaring that he was not a machine. As a final act of defiance, he demanded a mask fashioned after the Mumu skull of his ancestors, along with cloaks in the style of Kaleesh warriors for himself and his Magna Guards. Dooku saw this as nothing more than vanity, but the truth was deeper. Somewhere buried beneath layers of cybernetics and Separatist manipulation, the spirit of Kamino Jai Shalal still fought to survive. But even with these moments of resistance, the plan had worked. The demigod of Kali had been reforged into the ultimate weapon. The Sith had their warlord. The banking clan had their enforcer. Grievous had become the tool they wanted him to be. Grievous was now forever their slave. Chapter 3. Start of the Clone Wars. Grievous was first unleashed upon the battlefield during the opening battle of the Clone Wars, the Battle of Geonosis. Deep within the labyrinthine Geonosian catacombs, he was tasked with ensuring the safety of the Separatist Council. When Jedi Master Usimadu, accompanied by a company of clone troopers, attempted to intercept the fleeing leaders, Grievous intercepted them. A terror of speed and strength, he cut them all down, leaving no survivors. Taking the lightsaber of Usimadu as a trophy, he went on to depart Geonosis shortly afterwards aboard his personal starfighter Soulless One. Impressed by his performance at Geonosis, Count Dooku took a personal interest in Grievous's combat abilities. Over the following months, Dooku personally trained him in the art of lightsaber combat. Grievous proved to be a prodigy, mastering all 7 classical forms of Jedi lightsaber combat, including the refined Makashi and the aggressive Juyo. He surpassed all of Dooku's previous apprentices in raw dueling skill despite not having any connection to the Force. Dooku was very impressed at his new commander and promised Grievous that he should soon get the chance to face the Jedi once again. This chance came 4 months after the Battle of Geonosis at the Battle of Hypori. Leading a massive army of battle droids, he orchestrated a devastating assault on a Republic task force, systematically eliminating all resistance from the Republic. He had completely outmatched them with his superior tactics and had the few surviving Jedi, including Ila Secura and Jedi High Council members Ki-Adi-Mundi and Shaak-Ti, trapped within the wreckage of a downed Acclamator-class starship. The Jedi huddled together in fear, hearing the mechanical footsteps of hundreds of droids approaching, preparing for their final stand. But suddenly, the droids stopped their march and a mechanical voice seared through the chamber. A voice, taunting them that he'll kill them swiftly, granting them a warrior's death. The battle that followed was like nothing the Jedi had ever faced. Grievous fought like no organic being could. A whirlwind of flashing blades, his mechanical limbs contorted in impossible angles, striking from multiple directions at once. He moved with terrifying speed and precision, outmaneuvering even the Jedi Masters. One by one, he cut them down, pressing his advantage, stripping them of their weapons. Only Ki-Adi-Mundi remained standing. With all other Jedi either knocked unconscious or dead, Mundi fought desperately to hold Grievous at bay. However, before Grievous could deliver the killing blow, an ARC Trooper squad led by Captain Fordo arrived aboard a Republic gunship, holding Grievous at bay long enough to evacuate the wounded Jedi. Grievous watched them flee, taunting them that they had only delayed their inevitable demise. He collected the fallen Jedi's lightsabers, content with his victory. He was now a very much known component to the Jedi Order, being referred to as the Butcher of Hypori. In a single battle, he had killed 4 Jedi in solo combat. On Coruscant, the Jedi Council was shaken. Their fear forced them to break their own traditions, wanting more knights to face the danger presented by Grievous. Where once Jedi had to endure rigorous trials to achieve knighthood, now battlefield experience alone was enough. Among those rushed through the ranks was Anakin Skywalker. Grievous had gone from a feared warlord of wild space to the single greatest threat to the Republic's survival. Chapter 4. Supreme Commander of the Droid Army. As the Supreme Commander of the Droid Army, Grievous soon found himself on several battlefronts in order to help the Separatists gain a footholding in this war. Count Dooku, though, despite the several successes Grievous had shown so far, sought to test Grievous' strength by pitting him against two of his strongest subordinates, Asajj Ventress and the bounty hunter Durges. In the ensuing duel, Grievous overpowered Ventress quickly, slamming her into a glass case. Durges, after a short hassle, was decapitated, and when Ventress re-engaged him, Grievous calmly outmaneuvered her, dodging every strike before seizing her by the throat, declaring to her that he was the future, before choking her unconscious. Presenting Ventress's body to Dooku, Grievous asked if he could dispose of her. Dooku refused, acknowledging that both Ventress and Durges still had a purpose to serve. However, Grievous had successfully humiliated them, proving beyond doubt that he was the true Supreme Commander of the droid armies. Dooku was thoroughly satisfied with Grievous, who had exceeded even his highest expectations. Meanwhile, Grievous's name had spread like wildfire across the galaxy. Even Republic news outlets had begun to refer to him as the Night Slayer, a metal monstrosity that slaughtered Jedi with their own weapons. With each battle, his legend grew, and the Jedi Order was learning to fear him. Chapter 5. Defeat on the Malevolence. As the Clone Wars raged on and his reputation growing, Dooku gave Grievous command of the CIS's new prototype superweapon, a subjugator-class heavy cruiser called the Malevolence, a warship equipped with 2 ion cannons capable of disabling entire fleets. Under Grievous's command, the Malevolence launched a series of assaults on Republic forces, leaving not a single survivor. When Jedi Master Plo Koon led a Republic fleet to engage the Malevolence, Grievous's superweapon easily disabled the entire fleet and blew it to pieces. However, this time around, the hunters that were dispatched to destroy the escape pods didn't report back. Grievous soon found out that a small freighter, the Twilight, carrying Jedi Master Plo Koon and a few clone survivors, had escaped. This was a major setback, as the new superweapon was no longer a secret. To make up for this failure, Grievous went on a rampage, targeting medical transports across the outer and mid-rim. Thousands of Republic troops perished as he methodically destroyed unarmed medical convoys. Under Dooku's orders, he set his sights on an even greater target, the Kaleesh Shoals Medical Center, a Republic facility treating over 60,000 wounded clone troopers. However, the Republic anticipated this strike. A fleet was scrambled to intercept, led by Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi. As soon as the Malevolence emerged from hyperspace, it unleashed its ion cannons, disabling several medical frigates as well as some of the approaching Y-Wing starfighters. But Skywalker was not so easily defeated. A successful bombing run tore through the warship's interior, striking at its ion cannon power conduits. The damage was critical, and the superweapon was no longer functional. Kenobi then arrived with reinforcements, and the Republic's Venator-class cruisers opened fire on the Malevolence. Heavily damaged, its engines failing, Grievous attempted to retreat. He had underestimated his opponents greatly. In a last-ditch effort to get the Malevolence to safety, Dooku revealed that Senator Padme Amidala had been lured to the sector and should be taken as a hostage to bargain with the Republic. The Malevolence captured Amidala's ship, forcing the Republic fleet to cease their assault, instead opting to rescue Amidala themselves by infiltrating the Malevolence. On board the ship, Grievous came face to face with Obi-Wan Kenobi for the first time. The Jedi General had grown a galaxy-wide reputation, and Grievous was eager to face him. Their duel was very short, as Kenobi merely focused on escaping. In the meantime, Skywalker managed to rescue the Senator and also sabotage the ship's navicomputer to steer it into a nearby moon. Grievous himself chased after the fleeing Jedi in his starfighter when he was informed by the panicked droids that the Malevolence's navicomputer was steering them into a moon. Knowing the battle was lost, Grievous jumped to hyperspace. Moments later, the Malevolence crashed into the moon, marking one of Grievous's most humiliating defeats. Chapter 6. The Outer Rim Blitz. After the catastrophic loss of the Malevolence, Grievous had something to prove, and prove himself he did. In his next campaigns, he struck back at the Republic, facing and eliminating Jedi during the Battle of Aneth and Battle of Bakura before launching a devastating Blitz campaign across the Outer Rim. In just 1 month, he secured 6 major victories for the Confederacy of Independent Systems. Entire cities burned on Ord Mantell. Hyperlanes connecting the core to Bespin, Kessel, and Moncala fell under Separatist control, and crucial Republic supplies of Tabana gas and spice were cut off. Even Republic news networks openly admitted that their foothold in the Outer Rim was now in jeopardy. The Separatists were advancing, and Grievous was advancing on multiple fronts. With the Republic's supply chains disrupted, Grievous set his sights on another critical target, their spy network. The Republic, however, caught wind of his fleet's movements and sent General Anakin Skywalker to intercept him. Grievous attempted to outmaneuver Skywalker's fleet by navigating through the system's asteroid ring, as that would force the Republic to engage them on his terms. However, Skywalker anticipated this. He deployed ATTE walkers onto the asteroids, turning them into unexpected artillery platforms. With all of Grievous's shields focused toward the front, the walkers had clear shots at the weakest parts of the Separatist Munificent-class frigates. Grievous's fleet was obliterated. Realizing his loss, Grievous abandoned his fleet and rushed to his starfighter. As he tried to escape, he was nearly shot down by Skywalker. However, right before Skywalker was able to deliver the final shot, a piece of debris struck Skywalker's starfighter, crippling it just long enough for Grievous to escape to hyperspace. Though he had escaped, the general was far from finished. He was not to be beaten that easily by Skywalker. He took command of a nearby Separatist fleet while placing a spy droid inside Skywalker's own forces. The spy droid, R3-S6, would soon start feeding Grievous on Skywalker's movements. He had also arranged for the purchase of R2-D2, a droid full of Republic fleet codes and data. With these informations, perhaps they could use them to end the war swiftly. However, he was soon interrupted before he could extract the data, as Skywalker and a Republic strike team arrived to save R2. Knowing the value of R2, Grievous ordered his Magna Guards to defend the data at all costs, while he personally went to deal with the Jedi. When he rounded a corridor, he stopped and laughed. He couldn't believe it. He expected to find Skywalker, the Jedi who had previously bested him, but instead, before him stood a child. Ahsoka Tano, just 14 years old, radiated confidence as she ignited her blades. But Grievous had fought Jedi Masters. He knew she was no match for him. He quickly overwhelmed her, grabbing her by the throat, and sought to humble her arrogance a bit before killing her. But before he could kill her, Captain Rex detonated explosives, shaking the station. Distracted by the explosion, Ahsoka used the Force to maneuver one of Grievous's own arms against him, severing it with his own lightsaber. The kid had survived and escaped. With the station set to self-destruct, Grievous saw himself on the retreat once again. The name Skywalker burned into his mind as he had lost for the 3rd time to this Jedi in a short span of time. As always though, failure on Grievous's side was followed by a series of victories. To prove himself, Grievous led a 3-system conquest, capturing Jan Fathal, Koflis, and Nexus Ortai. After these successes, Dooku set his sights on something far greater, Kamino, the heart of the Republic's clone production. To achieve this, the Separatists first needed to neutralize Rishi Station, an outpost that acted as an early warning system for Kamino. Grievous sent the new commando droids to fulfill the task. However, the droids were soon overwhelmed by the surviving clone forces, which resulted in the destruction of the Rishi Station. Its destruction alerted the Republic of Grievous's intentions, and thus the assault on Kamino had to be abandoned for now. This attack had been too close to home for the Republic, however. For the first time, the Senate issued a galactic bounty on Grievous, wanting him dead or alive. They were desperate, willing to turn to the underworld itself if it meant eliminating the cyborg general. Dooku, on the other hand, had grown tired of the cycle of victories and failures. He needed his general to prove himself once more. A perfect opportunity arose when Newt Gunray, the leader of the Trade Federation, escaped Republic custody. The Jedi placed a tracker on him, hoping to follow his signal. Unbeknownst to them, though, they wouldn't be encountering Gunray there. Chapter 7: A Test of Strength. During the war, Grievous maintained a personal fortress on the 3rd moon of the planet Vasek. The stronghold housed his repair droid EVA-4D, his prized collection of Jedi lightsabers and Padawan braids, as well as his pet Rogwart, Gore. One fateful day, while returning to his castle aboard the Soulless One, Grievous drifted into a rare moment of unconsciousness, reliving fragmented memories of his past as Kaimin Jai Shilal, the Kaleesh warlord. He recalled his transformation, the loss of his flesh, and the countless battles he had fought since becoming a cyborg. However, his recollection was abruptly interrupted when he arrived at the fortress, sensing that something was wrong. Upon entering his stronghold, he discovered his Magna Guards lying inactive. Before he could react, Jedi Master Kit Fisto and his former Padawan Nadar Veb emerged from the shadows, accompanied by a squad of clone troopers. The Jedi had infiltrated his castle, and Grievous, despite the element of surprise, welcomed the challenge. Drawing 2 lightsabers, he engaged the Jedi. Grievous quickly demonstrated why the Jedi feared him so much, quickly forcing the Jedi into a defensive stance. However, as the duel went on with the help of the clones, the Jedi managed to sever his legs. Though he felt no pain, the loss of his legs put him at a severe disadvantage. Seeing the futility of continuing the fight in this condition, Grievous quickly cut down a few of the clones and created just enough of a distraction to escape to his hidden command center. Inside it, EV-A4D informed him that the Magna Guards had been remotely deactivated for recharging. At that moment, it was clear to Grievous, Dooku had set him up. It was a test of his strength. If Grievous died, then he had outlived his usefulness. If he survived, then he would prove himself worthy. Grievous hated being manipulated. How many times did his master want him to prove himself? Then again though, his warrior's pride refused to let this be his end. Meanwhile, Kit Fisto realized their surprise advantage was gone. Fighting Grievous in his own castle was now a suicide mission, but before they could escape, they reactivated Magna Guards fired a rocket into the Republic shuttle, destroying their only way out. They were now trapped in the lair of Grievous, and now he was in control. In his repair chamber, Grievous's droid assistant, A4D, replaced his damaged legs and mask while his cybernetic pet, Gore, was let loose to deal with the intruders. A4D, seeing the mess he had to repair, questioned why the general submitted to the cybernetic changes, which Grievous quickly answered by calling them a choice of his own. It was a lie though. Deep down, he knew he had never chosen any of this. His body had been stolen from him, reforged into a weapon. His memories had been altered, his mind twisted by the Sith. But to admit that would mean admitting he had no control, and that was something he could not accept. After his repairs were completed, Grievous decided it was time to deal with the intruders himself, furious that they had killed his beloved pet Gore. As he approached their position, he was alerted that Fisto and Veb had located his hidden command center. Racing back, he found Veb waiting for him outside. The young Jedi, brimming with arrogance, believed he could take on the general alone. Amused by the young Jedi's attitude, Grievous engaged him and, after locking his sabers, quickly shot him with a blaster. The Padawan fell, and Grievous had yet another lightsaber to add to his ever-growing collection. All that was left was Kit Fisto. After chasing Fisto to the castle's outer platform, Grievous engaged Fisto in a duel by immediately using all 4 limbs. He knew that Fisto was not to be underestimated and required his full strength to defeat. The Jedi at first was overwhelmed but adapted quickly, managing to use thick fog to his advantage. With that, Fisto was able to sever one of Grievous's arms, and suddenly Grievous found himself on the defense. When Grievous's Magna Guards caught up to him, Fisto managed to escape by leaping onto his Delta 7 starfighter, leaving Grievous seething at another missed kill. Returning to his command center, Grievous attempted to pass off the battle as a victory. Instead, Dooku was unimpressed, stating that while Grievous's victory over Veb was expected, his failure to defeat Fisto showed room for improvement. As the transmission ended, Grievous clenched his fist in frustration. He had killed Nadar Veb, fought Kit Fisto to a standstill, and defended his fortress. But he knew that this wasn't good enough. Should he want to eradicate all Jedi, he had to be more clinical in these situations. Back on Coruscant, the Jedi Council was shaken. Kit Fisto's report confirmed their worst fears. Grievous was corrupting the Jedi Order itself. They had rushed Nadar Veb's rise to knighthood in response to the war, and it had cost him his life. His anger, his recklessness, had made him easy prey for the cyborg general. Even in defeat, Grievous had inflicted a wound upon the Jedi. Chapter 8: Battle of Felucia and Saleucami. As the war pressed on, General Grievous turned his attention to Felucia, a vital agricultural world supplying the Republic with resources. The Separatists, recognizing its strategic importance, launched a full-scale invasion led by Grievous himself. The Republic, under the command of Jedi Generals Skywalker and Kenobi, and clone forces, were quickly overwhelmed by the sheer number of Separatist battle droids. With the Republic forces withdrawing, Felucia fell into Separatist hands. In another maneuver, Grievous launched an assault on Durin, the homeworld of the Republic-allied Keldors. Although this attack was meant to serve as a diversion, preventing the Jedi from interfering with the Separatist secret droid foundries on Geonosis, Grievous took a lot of pleasure seeing his forces decimate the Keldor. He took joy in their suffering. Any humanity he ever had long been buried. The diversion was a success, and the Republic scrambled to intercept him. Having bought enough time, he retreated his forces from Durin. The Republic at this point desperately sought to capture Grievous, but he remained unpredictable, striking without warning. His next prey turned out to be Jedi Master Eth Koth. After tracking his Venator, he quickly dismantled the ship. As the hull burned and the crew scrambled to defend themselves, Grievous stormed the bridge, flanked by commando droids and his Magna Guards. His sole focus on yet another Jedi trophy that was about to be claimed. Grievous engaged Jedi Master Eth Koth in lightsaber combat and, after a short skirmish, overwhelmed and captured the Jedi Council member. Upon returning to his ship, Grievous reflected on his fight and noticed that honor seemed less and less of a concern to him. When before he always wanted to face the Jedi alone, now he'd rather have his Magna Guards do most of the part. Perhaps there was some sort of boredom setting in, or perhaps the Jedi just were getting weaker. More and more, he saw his droid army as an extension of himself, not just weapons, but a direct manifestation of his power. To instill further fear into the Republic, Grievous transmitted a holo recording to Coruscant, showing them how powerless they were to stop him, torturing the captured Jedi Council member in front of them. His voice was cold, filled with nothing but contempt for his actions against the hated Jedi. Unbeknownst to Grievous, though, Koth was able to send a message using sign language, revealing their location to the Jedi. Soon, a massive Republic strike force, with Obi-Wan Kenobi at its head, exited hyperspace, engaging Grievous's fleet. Although surprised by the sudden assault, a smirk spread below Grievous's masked face as Kenobi's voice crackled over the comm. A rematch with Kenobi. He had secretly waited for that. Grievous's ship seized Kenobi's vessel, dragging it toward the Separatist flagship. As Kenobi's ship was drawn into the hangar, commando droids led the boarding assault, clearing out Republic troops, while the Magna Guards pushed Kenobi toward the bridge to tire him out. Grievous soon entered behind them, and after exchanging a few words with Kenobi, he engaged the Jedi alongside his Magna Guards. Kenobi attempted to cut through the cyborg's facade and reach whatever remained of the warrior he once was, by reminding him of his past. But his words were futile. Grievous was consumed by revenge and only sought to inflict pain upon the Jedi. As the fight went on, Kenobi, one of the greatest duelists in the Order, was pushed to his absolute limit. Grievous's inhuman speed and strikes made him a monstrous opponent, but Kenobi had an edge that he never could have: the Force. Seeing an opening, Kenobi hurled Grievous's own Magna Guards against him. The cyborg barely recovered before he was informed that Skywalker and Gallia had freed Eth Koth. Recognizing he had been outmaneuvered, Grievous snarled in frustration. But there was still one last way to deny the Jedi their victory. He ordered his own ship to open fire on Kenobi's vessel while he was still inside it. The explosions rocked the ship, forcing Kenobi and his troops to abandon their pursuit of him to avoid being killed in the destruction. Meanwhile, Grievous smashed his way through Cody's clones, making his way back to the ship. Gallia intercepted him, but she too was forced back by the chaos of the battle. His ship, though, at this point had suffered massive damage. Forced to flee his ship, Grievous rushed into a landing craft, descending towards Saleucami's surface. Upon their descent, their landing craft was hit with debris, forcing them down to the surface, trapping Grievous there. The Republic, sensing his weakness, moved in to seize this prime opportunity to capture or kill Grievous once and for all. This was their best chance they ever had. After traveling several kilometers across the barren landscape of Saleucami, Grievous and his remaining droids found an escape pod and managed to send a distress signal to the Separatist fleet, requesting extraction. However, before their rescuers could arrive, Kenobi's forces caught up with them. Once again, the two warriors clashed in a duel. Despite Kenobi's skill, Grievous managed to briefly stun the Jedi, allowing him just enough time to use his built-in grappling hook to latch onto the floating escape shuttle. The last thing Grievous saw was Kenobi's frustrated expression, laughing as he made his escape. Though the battle had not gone entirely in his favor, Grievous had successfully evaded capture. His war against the Republic and the Jedi continued, his hatred burning brighter than ever. Despite this loss, he had reaffirmed his role as the Separatists' most effective enforcer and tactician yet again. Chapter 9. The Battle of Kamino. Following the failed attack on Kamino due to the destruction of the Rishi Moon outpost, General Grievous and Asajj Ventress were once again ordered by Count Dooku to coordinate their efforts for a second assault on the Republic's cloning facility. As the war was progressing, they felt an attack on Kamino would cripple the Republic's ability to replenish its forces. They sought to annihilate Tipoca City, and while also getting the clone template DNA to develop bioweapons against them. Despite having a dislike for her, Grievous was forced to work with Ventress on this mission. As the Separatist fleet engaged the Republic blockade, Grievous employed a sacrificial tactic, using unarmed transport ships as shields to absorb enemy fire. Hidden among the debris were parts for assault ships that could be assembled in the ocean to launch an attack on the city. The tactic worked flawlessly, and Tipoca City was soon under siege. Leading the charge aboard one of the assault craft, Grievous ordered his droids to show no mercy, slaughtering clone troopers as they stormed the city. He advanced toward the command post held by ARC Trooper Commander Colt and his men, cutting through the clone defenses. Near the birth chambers, Grievous ran across Ventress, just as she killed Commander Colt. Although he never held much respect for her, Grievous did something he rarely did and acknowledged her skill, comparing it to his own. When Ventress snared back that he didn't wield the Force, Grievous was reminded again why he disliked her. Annoyed but focusing on the greater task at hand, Grievous ignored the comment, telling her to secure the clone DNA while Grievous led the assault on the clone barracks. As he pushed on, he was intercepted by Obi-Wan Kenobi. The Great General Kenobi was also here and awaiting their next rematch. This time around, the Jedi was no longer holding back, and neither was Grievous. Determined to finally kill Kenobi, in their duel, Grievous managed to disarm Kenobi, but was then pushed back by a Force push. Grievous, seeing that he didn't have the upper hand in this environment, retreated out of the facility toward a hangar pathway in an attempt to break Kenobi's momentum. When the Jedi finally caught up to him, he re-engaged Kenobi yet again. Before he could claim any ground, though, the Trident warship crashed through the platform, separating them. Kenobi slipped, falling toward the ocean below. Grievous dug his claws into the wreckage, gripping tight as he watched his nemesis plummet into the stormy sea. He laughed, savoring the thought of Kenobi's pathetic demise. Assuming that Ventress's mission was a success, he retrieved Ventress and retreated from Kamino. However, Ventress had failed her mission, and the battle over Kamino was ultimately a failure in the eyes of the Separatists. The war wasn't going as they had planned. There had been a few big setbacks. In the aftermath of the battle, the Republic Senate and the Separatist Parliament debated whether to escalate the war or pursue peace. Ultimately, the Separatist Parliament voted in favor of peace negotiations. Unwilling to let the war end prematurely, Sidious ordered Count Dooku to sabotage the peace process. Acting on Dooku's command, Grievous knew exactly how to disrupt this peace effort. He orchestrated an undercover operation to deposit a squad of droids disguised as sanitation units onto Coruscant. These droids successfully infiltrated the planet's power grid, causing a massive blackout across the capital. The attack plunged Coruscant into chaos, convincing the Republic leadership that the Separatists were not interested in peace, effectively derailing the peace talks and ensuring the war would continue, and so would the chance for Grievous to continue his conquest against the Jedi. Chapter 10. A Trial in the Force. After slaying yet another Jedi Master and Padawan on Ladiv, Grievous searched their belongings and discovered a holopad containing coordinates. Coordinates that had drawn the Jedi to this jungle-covered world. Following the signal, he arrived at an ancient Jedi temple. Scaling its stone walls with ease, he entered its hollowed halls, sneering at the statues of Jedi Masters erected in their own honor. His statues had been earned, monuments to victory in battle, built upon the bones of his enemies. With a scoff, he ignited his sabers and slashed through the pathetic tributes, reducing them to rubble. After evading several traps built into the temple, he reached the inner sanctum, where a shimmering waterfall of light cascaded before him. Curious about it, he reached into the glow, only to feel nothing. His frustration boiled over, blaming it on Jedi tricks, and then lunged headfirst into the light. Grievous suddenly found himself drifting in an endless void, and then a voice started talking to him, asking him if it was knowledge he seeked here. As Grievous answered by telling the voice that he only seeked the destruction of the Jedi, the voice laughed at him. "You speak of destruction, yet you have only destroyed yourself." And suddenly, Grievous was no more, and he was Kaimin Jai Shalal once again. flesh and blood, in an organic and unbroken body. Desperate, he argued with the voice. He had become something greater, something stronger. He had made the Jedi fear his name. But the voice objected, telling him that he had sought to destroy a power he had no understanding about nor connection with. Suddenly, Grievous's limbs started to fall away, one by one, watching as his body vanished into the void, leaving only a handful of organs, his heart, his brain, and his eyes floating there. The voice spoke out once again, claiming that he had replaced his divine, force-connected body with that of a machine, claiming he had no power nor the understanding to wield it. As his brain and eyes fell away, dissolving into nothingness, the vision ended. Grievous erupted from the vision stream, gasping, only to realize that nothing had changed. He was still a machine. Furious, he slashed at the shimmering portal, but his attacks had no effect. The temple remained untouched. Seething with rage, he stormed out onto a nearby cliffside, calling in his fleet to begin an orbital bombardment, reducing the temple to flaming rubble. Grievous stood there for hours, watching the ruins burn as day turned to night. But as he turned away, a glow still flickered beneath the rubble. The Force had not been destroyed and could never be destroyed by Grievous. The vision was right in everything. The general had completely abandoned his warrior ways, desperately trying to get revenge on the Jedi. The former freedom fighter who started out with the goal to end the enslavement of his people had enslaved himself completely. Chapter 11. A series of setbacks. The war was still at precedent. Grievous was still determined to destroy the Republic. The next conquest arrived soon when Dooku manipulated the Gungan leader Boss Leone in an effort to bring the Gungan Grand Army to the Separatist side. Grievous went to Naboo personally, expecting the Gungans to fight alongside him as Dooku had promised him. However, after landing, Grievous soon found out that the Republic had somehow foiled their plan and his entire droid army had been shut off. To make matters worse, he saw himself surrounded by the entire Gungan army. Despite cutting down several Gungan warriors, he was captured by their combined efforts and the sacrifice of Gungan General Tarpal. Naboo celebrated his capture as a major victory, cherishing the thought that his capture would bring, but the triumph was short-lived. Dooku managed to capture Anakin Skywalker and offered a prisoner exchange. Despite an initial reluctance, Padme Amidala, having her personal connection to Anakin, gave in to her personal feelings over ending the war prematurely, trading Grievous for Skywalker. Freed from his restraints, the general departed Naboo, furious over his imprisonment but eager to return to battle to get back at the Jedi. Following his escape, Grievous resumed his campaign against the Jedi. He learned of the location of the flagship of Jedi Master Adigalia. Leading his forces personally, he boarded the ship and engaged Gallia in combat, ultimately capturing her. As he transported his prisoner, Grievous's fleet encountered a pirate warship. Being in high spirits after the successful capture of Gallia, a Jedi Council member, he viewed the pirate ship as target practice, firing on it out of pure amusement. However, his distraction proved costly as Jedi Master Plo Koon, leading a Republic strike force of 5 Venators, attacked his flagship and managed to free Adigalia. Though Grievous tried to fight back, the surprise element and the sheer number of Republic forces overwhelmed his ship, forcing him to abandon it. Once again, he was left to flee in order to fight another day. Chapter 12. Operation Durges Lance. Though he suffered setbacks, Grievous remained a relentless force in the war. Every battle, every encounter further cemented his reputation as one of the Republic's most feared enemies. Even when captured, he always found a way to return to the battlefield, his hatred for the Jedi and Republic fueling his every move. True to his nature, Grievous turned these defeats into devastation, unleashing a campaign of terror upon the Republic's worlds. His first strike was the Battle of Perrin II, where he slew Jedi Master Sinan and claimed his lightsaber as yet another trophy. Soon after, he led the seizure of Banvar Station and the conquest of Vandos. Alongside the bounty hunter Durge, he orchestrated a campaign that would set the Corellian trade spine ablaze. He led a Blitz assault, striking hundreds of worlds along the Republic's most vital trade route to the core worlds. This blitzkrieg became known as Operation Durges Lance. In the campaign, Grievous managed to capture the core world of Duro, forcing a public surrender from its chief representative live on the HoloNet. He knew that fear itself was a weapon, one as valuable as any fleet or army. To further instill fear in the Republic, Grievous went on to order a sustained orbital bombardment of Humbarine, a founding world of the Republic with a cityscape spanning the entire planet, just like Coruscant. For an hour, his warships rained fire and death upon the Ecumenopolis. The planet's crust fragmented, its millennia-old civilization reduced to molten rock. After destroying Humbarine, he attempted to test out a new bacterial weapon. In the Wemale sector, Grievous deployed the Loadorvian Brain Plague. From humans to Rhodians, it made no distinction. Millions perished, and the Wemale sector was cleared of life. At this point, the public perception of General Grievous, due to the brutality of his campaign, had shifted yet again. No longer was he seen as just a Jedi hunter, he was now one of the worst war criminals, a name whispered in fear across the Republic, unaware of the fact that that is exactly what Grievous was all about. Instilling fear into his enemies, be it the Jedi or other foes. If they were fearful, he had an advantage over them. Grievous sought to break the Republic's morale. Operation Durges Lance was a full success. The Republic was in disarray, scrambling their forces away from the Outer Rim to defend the core worlds. The Separatists, in the meantime, could move in on these planets in the Outer Rim. Chapter 13. Descent into Inhuman Warfare. In 20 BBY, Grievous managed to kidnap Republic Ambassador Kian, using the hostage as bait to lure Jedi into a trap on Vandos. The first two knights to respond were cut down, and Grievous seized a Mon Calamari starcruiser, which held both a Jedi Master and a group of younglings. This was exactly what he had been hoping for. He quickly executed their master, but kept the younglings alive, imprisoning them. Grievous had begun some cruel experimentations with transferring Force-sensitive beings into droid bodies, much like his own transformation. He thought that if he succeeded in doing so, he could create unstoppable warriors, combatants free from the weakness of flesh, yet still retaining their connection to the Force. With the group of younglings, he had several test subjects for his experiments. However, before the experiment could begin, a rescue team of Jedi stormed the Separatist lab. Annoyed that the Jedi arrived earlier than he anticipated, he engaged the Jedi rescue team in battle. Although he managed to defeat two Padawans from the strike team, the younglings were saved. Disappointed by the setback, Grievous turned his attention back to the war. During the Battle of Honoghr, a defoliator chemical was accidentally released, wiping out the planet's entire ecosystem. The event gave him an idea. With the brain plague and chemical weapons, the Separatists could devastate entire worlds before even setting foot on them. By deploying biological weapons, he could turn every Republic world into a graveyard, making invading them mere child's play. Grievous petitioned his idea to Dooku to expand the use of bioweapons across the Republic, but to his surprise, the Sith Lord refused. Grievous couldn't understand this. After all, deploying these viruses across the Republic worlds would easily secure their victory. Unbeknownst to Grievous, though, he had stumbled upon a secret, one his master was hiding from him. The Clone Wars was prefabricated, and victory was never an option for either side until the time was right. Knowing it was futile to go against his master's wishes, Grievous saw himself once again grinding out battles against the Republic. Grievous went on to launch a full-scale assault on Boz Pity, where he faced Jedi Master Soon Bates. He easily killed him and then went on to cut through the clones on the battlefield with the lightsaber of the Jedi he had just killed. But then the tide turned. Grievous saw as his droids were hurled across the battlefield. Moments later, a human Jedi with a purple lightsaber stood in front of him. It was Mace Windu. Dooku had told him that he was one of the most powerful Jedi alive. Trying to take the Jedi by surprise, Grievous launched himself at Windu, but with a single motion of Windu's hand, a damaged stab was hurled at the cyborg. Grievous collapsed, momentarily unconscious. His Magna Guards quickly rushed in, distracting Windu long enough and dragging his battered body to safety. Grievous awoke on his ship enraged. His Jedi kill streak had ended in the most embarrassing way possible. Boz Pity went on to be lost due to Windu's involvement. Grievous was quickly involved in battle again, though when Wat Tambor was trapped in his fortress on Zagoba when the Republic launched a massive assault. Grievous led the defense, holding back the clone forces while Tambor remained under siege. During the battle, Grievous encountered a young Boba Fett, who had been sent to kill Wat Tambor. Scuffing at the child in front of him, he quickly hurled the child into a cluster of poisonous fungus, leaving Boba for dead. The Battle of Zagoba went on for months after that, before the Republic finally claimed victory. Shortly after, Grievous was once again called to protect a CIS leader. This time, to his great irritation, it was Newt Gunray. Gunray was everything Grievous despised. cowardly, greedy, and utterly spineless. Yet, despite his contempt, the general was forced to come to his aid when Gunray recklessly returned to Cato Neimoidia to recover some personal trinkets he had left behind. Tracked by Republic intelligence, Gunray was nearly destroyed by clone starfighters. At first, Grievous hesitated, almost letting the Neimoidian perish, but ultimately he knew that losing Gunray would upset Dooku, damage his own reputation, and potentially give the Republic access to Separatist secrets. Grievous eliminated the pursuing Republic fighters, but the damage had already been done. Republic slicers had recovered Gunray's Mechno chair, which contained data on the upcoming Separatist offensive at Belderone. Armed with this intelligence, the Republic ambushed Grievous's fleet, wiping out nearly all of his ships. The only redeeming factor Grievous could find was that 27 Jedi perished in the battle. Upon discovering how the Republic had learned of their plans at Belderone, Grievous was infuriated. He nearly crushed Gunray's skull, only stopping at the last moment out of fear of Dooku's retribution. Chapter 14: The Slaughter of Dathomir. Following Asajj Ventress's betrayal of Count Dooku, the Sith Lord turned to General Grievous to carry out his vengeance. Grievous happily complied, as he got the chance to get back at Ventress, taking his fleet to Dathomir. Upon arrival, he commanded the invasion from within one of his landing ships. He had hyena bombers level the outer villages, while ranks of droids pushed into the dark forest, using defoliator tanks to burn away the sacred burial trees that housed the spirits of their ancestors. The entire landscape was on fire, nothing left living. As the Night Sisters fought back, Ventress tried to turn the tide by challenging Grievous to a duel. Grievous, confident in his superiority, accepted the challenge and engaged Ventress in combat. At first, the cyborg general dominated the fight, taunting her of being an unworthy opponent. After all, he had beaten her easily before. However, he underestimated Ventress's resolve and desperation. Ventress was fighting for her life here, throwing herself at him with everything she had. With that, she was able to use a gap in his defense to cut off one of his hands, knocking him to the ground with the Force. Grievous found himself on the floor, with Ventress raising her lightsabers to deliver the final blow. Grievous reacted instinctively. The honor of the Kaleesh warrior had died long ago, replaced by pure survival instinct. He screamed fire, having his droids open fire on Ventress, wounding her and knocking her down. Before Grievous could deliver the killing blow, an army of undead Night Sisters, resurrected by the dark magics of Mother Talzin, charged at Grievous, swarming him. Although the undead warriors couldn't really harm his armored body, they held him off long enough for Ventress to escape. But that didn't matter now. Dooku told Grievous to leave Ventress and go after Mother Talzin, the more important target. Cutting through waves of undead warriors and Night Sisters, he pushed into Mother Talzin's village, leading the droid charge at the front now, relishing the massacre. In the Night Sisters' coven, he found and executed the Elder Shaman responsible for the rise of the undead warriors, while Mother Talzin disappeared into a green mist. With the death of the Shaman, the undead warriors collapsed, sealing the Night Sisters' already impending doom. Grievous then went on to raid every Night Sister village, leaving none behind. Each Night Sister on Dathomir was massacred, and the planet was left in ruins, its once thriving coven reduced to a graveyard. The mission was a resounding success for the Separatists, as Grievous had not only secured Dooku's safety, but had also obliterated an entire faction that could have posed a threat to the Sith's grand plan. Chapter 15: Battle of Florum. Following his victory at Dathomir, Grievous turned his sights back on the Outer Rim. After hearing from intelligence that Kenobi's fleet was at the planet Florum, he couldn't help himself to strike at his most hated adversary. He took his fleet and launched a surprise attack against Kenobi, devastating their fleet. Yet again, as in their other encounters, Grievous boarded the ship and engaged Kenobi. This time around, he managed to gain the upper hand in their duel, pushing Kenobi back and forcing him to abandon his ship. Although Kenobi set the ship to self-destruct, forcing Grievous to leave without getting any intel he had hoped for, it was still a victory for Grievous. The Jedi fleet over Florum was gone. He had bested his greatest rival, and now he could go for yet another target. Grievous targeted the planet Florum, home to the Weequay pirate king Hondo Ohnaka. This invasion was not just another conquest, it was meant as retribution. Years earlier, Ohnaka and his pirates had captured Count Dooku and held him for ransom. Now, under Dooku's orders, Grievous sought to make Ohnaka pay. Grievous landed on Florum with his forces, swiftly taking control of Ohnaka's stronghold. The pirate leader was captured, and his men were forced to submit. However, the situation had an unforeseen turn. when seemingly out of nowhere Ahsoka Tano and 6 Jedi younglings showed up and freed Hondo, trying to escape with him. Grievous personally gave chase, riding a CIS combat speeder. As the pirates and the Jedi split off, Grievous decided to chase after Ahsoka's group, forcing their escape vehicle to crash. As the dust settled, the cyborg warlord emerged from the wreckage, his yellow eyes gleaming, cheering that there were so many lightsabers he could add to his collection. However, before he could move in on them, the Slave One arrived to help the Jedi escape. Seeing the Jedi were about to escape, Grievous pushed on and engaged in a duel with Ahsoka, who had stayed behind to try and fend him off to allow the others to escape. She had grown stronger since their last encounter, yet she was still no match for the cyborg general. Grievous overpowered her easily, taunting her and playing with her. He relished seeing his prey struggle to fight back against him. Just as Grievous was about to finish Ahsoka, she managed to use the Force to push him back and escape. With Onaka gone and the Jedi escaped, Grievous ordered his forces to raise the pirate stronghold, leaving Florum in ruins before withdrawing his army. Chapter 16. Crystal Conspiracy. As Darth Sidious moved the Clone Wars toward its final stage, he entrusted Grievous with another vital task: to retrieve an enormous Kyber crystal, a priceless relic of unimaginable power. The crystal had fallen into the hands of Sugi arms dealers, who planned to sell it to Count Dooku. The deal was to take place on the neutral world of Utapau, with local Amani warriors providing security. Grievous arrived on Utapau with his Magna Guards, overseeing the final negotiations. However, he soon found himself in a chase through the planet's cave networks when Kenobi and Skywalker intercepted the deal and stole the crystal, where the Jedi managed to shake him. Frustrated, Grievous returned to Pal City, where he was surprised to learn that the crystal had been secured in a Separatist shuttle and the Jedi had been captured by the Utapau security force. When Grievous arrived at the landing site, expecting to confront the Jedi, he was once again surprised to learn that the Jedi had escaped yet again. Furious, he executed the Utapau governor before turning his attention back towards the crystal. The Jedi didn't matter after all, he thought to himself as the Kyber crystal was secured. However, when the shuttle with the crystal took off, the 2 Jedi proved to be a nuisance once again, forcing the shuttle to make an emergency landing in a Separatist ship. However, the Jedi's little maneuver had separated them. When Grievous arrived in the hangar to confront them, he once again stood face to face with Kenobi. After more than 2 years of rivalry and several duels, he found himself overpowering Kenobi in this duel, disarming him and seizing him by the throat. Choking them, he then slammed him to the ground. For a moment, Kenobi believed this was it for him, but Grievous didn't want it to end this easily. Extremely content to have bested his adversary, he prepared an execution chamber to kill his rival slowly and painfully. However, before Grievous could follow through with this plan, Skywalker freed Kenobi and together they fought their way back to the crystal. To Grievous's dismay, the Jedi tricked the droids into firing on the Kyber crystal, provoking a chain reaction as the crystal overloaded and exploded. Realizing what was about to happen, Grievous fled to his starfighter, pursuing the Jedi as they escaped into hyperspace. The explosion from the crystal consumed the entire Separatist fleet, with Grievous barely managing to escape. He had failed his mission, and to make matters worse, his opponents roamed free once again. Chapter 17. Encounter with Grandmaster Yoda. Soon after, Grievous launched an assault on Harun Kal, where Jedi General Depa Billaba was stationed. He made quick work of her forces, devastating her clone battalion and almost killing Billaba in their encounter. Her duel with Grievous left Billaba in such a bad state that she stepped down from the Jedi Council to recover mentally. At some point, Grievous was assigned to oversee Operation Titan, a secret project aimed at developing a new breed of super battle droids called Mega Droids. Upon arrival, Grievous was surprised to find that none other than Jedi Grandmaster Yoda had infiltrated the facility. The cyborg had not expected to see this Jedi of all of them here, but cherished the opportunity to face the teacher of Dooku. Upon finding Yoda, he was surprised by his small size, but greeted him nonetheless. Yoda, however, didn't even flinch and just kept downloading the files from the computer while calmly replying to him that he wasn't fit to wield a lightsaber as it's a Jedi's weapon. Grievous lunged forward, his blade spinning in a blur, but Yoda casually leapt over the cyborg, delivering a quick strike to his head. A fresh mark scorched into his faceplate, but Grievous merely laughed. As the duel continued, Grievous found himself unable to even land a single strike. As Yoda evaded every strike and suddenly, he was frozen. The Jedi used the Force to freeze him in place and, with another flick of his tiny little hand, sent him hurling backward into the wall. Grievous quickly recovered, his rage fueling him. His battle droids arrived and opened fire on Yoda. However, instead of aiding their general, their attack gave Yoda the perfect distraction, allowing him to escape before Grievous could stop him. Yoda was gone. Enraged, the general crushed a battle droid beneath his mechanical foot. The Jedi had not only discovered vital information about Operation Titan, but had also humiliated him in battle. But when reflecting on it, he recognized that the Jedi Grandmaster had completely outmaneuvered him. He swore to one day get his revenge. Chapter 18. Destroying the Shadow Collective. Following Darth Maul's escape from Darth Sidious's custody, Dooku summoned General Grievous and tasked him with hunting down the rogue Sith Lord. Grievous wasn't surprised to hear of Maul's escape. He had previously warned that Maul was too dangerous to be left alive and should have been executed when they had the chance. However, Dooku wanted Grievous to force Maul into a position of desperation, one that would compel him to seek help from Mother Talzin, the Night Sister leader whom Sidious saw as the biggest threat left to oppose the rule of the Sith. Complying with his master's orders, Grievous directed his fleet toward the planet Zanbar. Grievous knew the battle would not be easily won. Unlike the Republic's clone troopers, whom the droids had fought countless times, Maul's Mandalorian warriors were far more dangerous and unpredictable. As the battle commenced, the Separatist droid army stormed the Shadow Collective's stronghold. Amid the chaos, Grievous personally entered the battlefield, cutting down Mandalorians with his lightsabers. He soon found Maul on the battlefield. Just like with the Jedi, rather than engaging him immediately, Grievous first set his Magna Guards to exhaust Maul before facing him himself. When Maul had defeated the Magna Guards, Grievous came in and the two warriors clashed. Although Maul was a formidable warrior, Grievous was a different type of menace, especially after having winded Maul down with his Magna Guards. Grievous managed to kick Maul back, taunting Maul that his forces had been annihilated. However, Maul refused to yield. Calling in reinforcements, his Gauntlet starfighters rained down fire upon the battlefield, forcing Grievous's forces to scatter. By the time the dust settled, both armies had sustained heavy casualties. Though Maul had managed to escape, his army had suffered tremendous losses. Reporting back to Dooku, Grievous reported on his victory. Maul had taken a severe hit and would inevitably seek out Talzin just like they had planned. As Maul regrouped, Grievous's spies intercepted intelligence confirming that Mandalorian warships were amassing on Ord Mantell. Grievous proposed a swift strike against Maul's growing army, but Dooku advised patience, reminding him that their primary goal was still to locate Talzin. Grievous, however, was still skeptical of the importance placed on the Night Sister matriarch and questioned why she was considered such a threat, considering he had already wiped out her entire coven. Dooku shivered, responding that Talzin's powers were so vast that even Sidious feared her and that she could jeopardize the Sith's plans. Shortly thereafter, the Separatists detected a ship departing from Dathomir. Suspecting that Talzin was aboard, Grievous and his fleet made their way towards Ord Mantell, preparing to obliterate Maul's forces and Talzin. Upon arriving at Ord Mantell, Grievous ordered an immediate orbital bombardment. After the dust had settled, Dooku, alongside Magna Guards and a droid army, descended to search for Maul and Talzin among the ruins. However, something felt amiss to Grievous. The warships that had drawn them to the planet were nowhere to be found. The general's instincts soon proved correct as the missing Mandalorian warships suddenly emerged, launching a counterattack on the Separatist fleet. In the midst of the battle, Maul personally boarded Grievous's command ship. Storming into the bridge, Maul single-handedly dismantled nearly every battle droid in his path. After Maul arrived at the bridge, Grievous found himself surrounded by Maul's forces. A quick duel with Maul ensued, with Maul overpowering him and holding his lightsaber to Grievous's throat. Maul presented him with a choice: either deactivate the Separatist droid forces or die. With little alternative, Grievous was forced to comply, effectively shutting down his entire army. This in turn led to the capture of Dooku on the ground as well. Held as a prisoner aboard Maul's ship, Grievous and Dooku were to be used as leverage in an attempt to bargain with Sidious. However, the Dark Lord dismissed Maul's demands outright, stating that he had no further use for either Dooku or Grievous and would simply let them die. Maul then ordered his captives to be separated. Dooku was taken for interrogation, while Grievous was placed under heavy guard in the brig. As he was led away, the cyborg turned towards Dooku, telling him it would be rather unfortunate should he have to add Dooku's lightsaber to his collection in their next meeting, confident that he would escape. When the Republic unexpectedly attacked Maul's forces on Ord Mantell, Dooku, using the Force, manipulated the locks on Grievous's cell door, granting him the opportunity to escape. Without hesitation, Grievous tore through his Mandalorian guards with his bare hands and feet, crushing their bodies with sheer force. Finding an escape pod, he fled the ship to rendezvous with Sidious. Maul had to be stopped. Following Sidious's instructions, Grievous and a detachment of battle droids tracked Dooku's signal to Dathomir aboard the Scimitar. Activating the ship's cloaking device, they approached undetected. Landing on the barren world, Grievous and Sidious made their way towards the ancient chamber where Dooku's signal led. Inside, Maul had just completed a ritual allowing Talzin to temporarily possess Dooku's body. As Sidious engaged the possessed Dooku in battle, Grievous once again dueled Maul. Maul soon found himself at the brink of his power as the cyborg's relentless slashes came down on him. In a last-ditch effort though, Maul managed to force-push Grievous out of the chamber. This took the general out of the battle temporarily as he had to claw his way back into the chamber. Upon arriving, he witnessed the final moments of the battle. Talzin and Sidious were in a stalemate, with Sidious engaging her magic with Force Lightning. Maul was standing behind Talzin and was thrown back by Talzin and being dragged away for escape. Talzin soon collapsed after being overpowered by Sidious. Seeing the opening, Grievous calmly walked up to her, igniting both his lightsabers and executing Talzin in front of a distraught Maul. With this, he had destroyed the final Night Sister and fulfilled his task to completion. With Talzin dead, Grievous commanded his forces to secure Dathomir, eliminating the remnants of the Shadow Collective. Though Maul had managed to escape, the Sith had achieved a significant victory, erasing one of the last major threats to the Sith's impending rule over the galaxy. Chapter 19: Final Phase of the Clone Wars. After defeating Maul's Shadow Collective, Grievous turned his attention back to the Clone Wars. There, Grievous encountered Depa Billaba once again. Fixating on finishing what he had started, he demanded her death. Face to face with Billaba once more, Grievous ignited his two lightsabers and attacked. Billaba, stronger than before after having gained clarity upon her defeat, parried every strike before hurling him back with the Force. Snarling, Grievous re-engaged, splitting his arms to strike with 4 blades at once. Billaba barely managed to sever 2 of his lower hands, but Grievous landed a deep slash across her back, leaving her heavily wounded. Despite the injury, Billaba refused to fall. Soon, the clones and Caleb Doom rushed in, forcing Grievous to fall back. As the Republic secured Magito, Billaba chose not to pursue him. She had learned to live with regret. Following the loss of the Kyber Crystal, Utapau seemed like the ideal refuge for the Separatist leadership. Darth Sidious commanded the key Separatist council members to gather on Utapau, and Grievous returned, this time with an invasion force. Thousands of battle droids and Magna Guards stormed the peaceful world, forcing the Utapau leadership into submission. When the ruling Utapau committee hesitated to comply, Grievous ordered their execution. A fortified base was constructed in Pao City, and a massively modified core ship took control of Level 10, serving as the headquarters of the Separatist forces. By the 3rd year of the Clone Wars, the Republic had seized the momentum, steadily pushing the Separatists back. Despite General Grievous's victories on Dathomir, Florum, and other battlefronts, the Confederacy of Independent Systems had suffered heavy losses, including the majority of its droid factories and key territories. Forced to retreat, the Separatists were largely confined to the Outer Rim, where the Republic intensified its campaign in what became known as the Outer Rim Sieges. The Republic launched blockades on key Separatist strongholds, stretching their forces thin. Clashes erupted not only in the Outer Rim, but also in the Mid-Rim and the colonies, further pressuring the CIS war machine. As part of this desperate struggle, Grievous set his sights on the critical shipyards of Annexus, a planet located on the coreward edge of the Outer Rim and home to vital Republic shipbuilding facilities. To claim Annexes, Grievous collaborated with Admiral Trench, who deployed large droid forces in a prolonged and costly battle for control of the shipyards. The Republic, however, mounted a fierce resistance, and despite the combined efforts of Trench and Grievous, the campaign ended in disaster for the Separatists. In the final engagement, Admiral Trench was killed, his fleet was obliterated, and the Annexes shipyards were secured by the Republic, marking yet another crushing blow to the CIS war effort. As the war raged, Grievous attempted to force the Wookiees to join the Separatists. Kashyyyk held tactical value, serving as a defensive stronghold, and was home to the Klatuvak Guild archives, which contained knowledge of unknown hyperspace routes. At first, the Wookiees remained neutral, engaging in diplomatic negotiations with both sides. Growing impatient though, Grievous ordered an all-out invasion, believing that sheer force would persuade them. This backfired spectacularly though, as instead of submitting to the aggression, the Wookiees declared full-scale war against the Separatists. Soon the Republic entered the war, which made the Battle of Kashyyyk yet another full-scale war that was draining the Separatist resources. Chapter 20. Battle of Coruscant. The Separatists were on the brink of defeat. After several setbacks at NX season, having their supply cut off from the core worlds and being pushed toward the Outer Rim, a decisive victory was needed to turn the tide of war. Then, Darth Sidious gave the order: an assault on Coruscant, the capital of the Republic. Grievous was provided coordinates of the Nexus route that would allow the Separatist fleet to bypass Republic defenses and launch a direct assault on Coruscant. For years, the Republic believed such an attack was impossible, as only they held the coordinates of the aforementioned Nexus route. Grievous's plan was simple: strike at the heart of the Republic, forcing the Jedi to abandon the Outer Rim sieges to defend Coruscant and capture the Chancellor for ransom. Seizing the last opportunity for a Separatist victory, Grievous mobilized his forces. The final offensive was launched. The Clone Wars had entered its final stage. Upon exiting hyperspace, the Separatist battleships engaged Republic defense forces in orbit. Grievous orchestrated chaos on the surface by having squadrons of Vulture droids execute suicide runs into the city's infrastructure, causing panic and destruction among the civilian population. With the city in disarray, he had his droid army land on the surface to engage the Jedi on the surface of Coruscant. Amid the turmoil, he personally ascended to the surface and led an elite strike force to 500 Republica, the Chancellor's residential complex. Meanwhile, Jedi Masters Mace Windu, Shaak Ti, and Kit Fisto rushed to Palpatine's aid in order to protect him. As they attempted to move the Chancellor via maglev train to a secure location, Grievous and his Magna Guards intercepted them. The cyborg general engaged Windu and Fisto in a lightsaber duel atop the speeding train. Despite Windu's unique fighting style, which Grievous was unfamiliar with, Grievous quickly adapted. He wouldn't let this encounter with Windu end like his last one. The duel ended though when Windu force-pushed Grievous off the train, sending him plummeting into the city below. However, the general was not so easily defeated. His droid forces retrieved him using a hijacked gunship, allowing him to continue his hunt for Palpatine. Eventually, he reached the Chancellor's hardened bunker, using security codes provided by Sidious to gain entry. Inside, he slaughtered waves of clone troopers and 4 of the Chancellor's Jedi protectors. With his path clear, Grievous seized Palpatine and prepared to make his escape. En route back, Shaak Ti attempted a desperate attempt to stop him, engaging the general in a duel but was no match to the cyborg. However, Grievous ultimately spared her, instructing her to deliver a message to the Jedi that their Chancellor was gone. As he fled, Windu managed to catch up to him and launched one final attack, using the Force to crush the plating around Grievous's organ sac. The duranium metal sliced into his remaining biological tissue, permanently worsening his already ragged breathing. Despite his injury, he had succeeded in his mission. It was a hard-fought victory, but a victory nonetheless. The Chancellor was brought aboard the Invisible Hand, Grievous's flagship, to get the Republic to surrender their forces. Meanwhile, the battle in space raged on against the Republic's defense fleet. Jedi generals Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi rushed to Coruscant upon learning of the Chancellor's capture. Battling their way through the chaos, they boarded Grievous's flagship. Once aboard, the 2 Jedi successfully fought through waves of droids, eventually confronting Count Dooku. Grievous during this time was on the bridge in negotiations with a Republic officer about the capture of Palpatine. He turned into the holovid to check in on Dooku's progress. To his surprise, he saw a lifeless body laying there that resembled Dooku. The Jedi, as well as the Chancellor, were both gone. Realizing slowly what he was looking at, his mask was blankly emotionless as ever. After a few moments, in a murderous tone, he said, "Dooku is dead, and the Jedi are on the loose. They have the Chancellor. Find them and bring them to me." He curled his metal fingers into a fist, then crushed down on the security panel with so much force that it collapsed the entire panel. Grievous was shocked and in anger. He couldn't fathom that any person in the galaxy aside from Sidious was able to come close, yet alone defeat Dooku, considering the countless sessions he had with Dooku in which he had failed time and time again to beat him. Although Grievous never held any affection for Dooku, he always held respect for him as a warrior. For the first time in the Clone Wars, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: fear. The 2 Jedi, powerful enough to best Dooku, were on the loose, and he would certainly be their next target. Deep in thought, Grievous was contacted by his droids. They had captured the Jedi in ray shields and immobilized them. Grievous ordered them to be brought back to the bridge, reveling in his triumph over the Jedi. Although he had initially been shocked at the death of Dooku, he now felt a sense of pride to have outlasted his master in this war. On the bridge, he once again stood face to face with Kenobi, and for the first time, Skywalker as well. Although they had clashed indirectly in plenty of battles, somehow they had never met face to face until this point. Having knowledge of the tales and legends about Skywalker, he was rather surprised to see a Jedi not much older than a child standing in front of him, far from the great warrior he had pictured to himself. When R2-D2 created the distraction which the Jedi used to free themselves, Grievous hesitated to engage himself. His thoughts called back to Dooku's lifeless body, one of the greatest warriors in his eyes who had been bested by the very Jedi that were standing in front of him. In a split decision, Grievous shattered the bridge's viewport using an electro staff, exposing the room to the vacuum of space. While the Jedi managed to remain inside, Grievous, protected by his internal life support systems, was sucked into the void. Using his grappling hook, he latched onto the exterior of the ship and climbed his way to an escape pod. The battle had been lost. The loss of Dooku and the loss of the Chancellor couldn't be redeemed. Before ejecting, he ordered every escape pod on the ship to launch, leaving the Jedi and Palpatine trapped aboard the crippled vessel. Grievous was picked up by a Separatist landing craft and, upon entering it, gave a full retreat to Utapau, where he had brought the Separatist Council a few months ago, attempting to regroup his forces there. 2/3 of the Separatist forces managed to survive the assault on Coruscant and retreated into hyperspace. The Battle of Coruscant had been the most decisive loss yet, and he knew coming back from here to win the war would be a very steep task. Chapter 21 Endgame. With Count Dooku dead, Grievous was officially now the leader of the entire Separatist alliance. This meant he was de facto at the head of military and the Separatist politics from here on out. Although defeated at Coruscant, he ordered the remaining forces to engage in a counterattack in the Outer Rim, where battles on Kashyyyk, Felucia, Magito, and several other fronts were still raging. Unbeknownst to Grievous, however, Darth Sidious had other plans for him. The war had served its purpose at this point, and Grievous had also served his purpose. He was to serve as nothing more than bait for its final stage, drawing Obi-Wan Kenobi away from Coruscant and, more importantly, from Anakin Skywalker, whom Sidious intended to fully claim as his new apprentice. Though Grievous was unaware of the Sith Lord's deception, he sensed something was wrong. The recent raid on Coruscant had cost the Separatists dearly, and Dooku's death left a gaping hole in their leadership structure. He himself had also suffered a rather critical injury by Windu, leaving him weaker than before. However, when Sidious contacted him, the Sith Lord reassured him that the war was nearly won, and that a new apprentice would soon take Dooku's place. Grievous remained skeptical, but as he saw no other alternatives really, he followed through on his order, relocating the Separatist Council to Mustafar while fortifying Utapau further as his new stronghold. With the Republic gaining momentum after Dooku's death and the Battle of Coruscant, capturing or killing Grievous became the Jedi's top priority. As predicted by Sidious, Obi-Wan Kenobi arrived on the planet, confronting the General in his secret command center. Amused by his old foe's persistence, but still having his injury in mind, Grievous ordered his Magna Guards to eliminate the Jedi, only for Kenobi to swiftly dispatch them. Realizing that the fight would be his alone, while also harboring back to his warrior ways, the cyborg drew 4 lightsabers and engaged his nemesis for their final duel. Though Grievous attacked at blinding speeds, striking at over 20 blows per second, he was unable to break through Kenobi's defense. Despite having held his own against countless Jedi and even a Sith Lord like Maul during the war, Kenobi's defense proved to be unmatched in their final duel, unlike any of their previous encounters, with Kenobi being completely entranced in the Force, parrying every single one of Grievous's strikes. Recognizing the General's growing frustration, Kenobi altered his tactics, adjusting his parries. With that, he managed to sever 2 of Grievous's mechanical arms, leaving Grievous with only 2 arms left. Before the duel could continue, Commander Cody and the 212th Attack Battalion arrived, launching a full-scale assault on the Separatist forces in Pao City. Despite the chaos, Grievous remained defiant. He taunted Kenobi, warning that the Jedi Order would soon fall. Kenobi responded with a powerful force push, slamming Grievous into a wall and knocking his remaining lightsabers from his grasp. Recognizing that he was beaten once again, the cyborg mounted his wheelbike and attempted to flee. A high-speed chase ensued, with Kenobi pursuing him atop a Varactyl named Boga. The 2 warriors clashed repeatedly during the pursuit before ultimately crashing onto Grievous's private landing platform. There, the duel devolved into a brutal fistfight. Grievous's inherent mechanical strength gave him the advantage, with him easily throwing Kenobi around. Kenobi, though, realizing Grievous had a loose chest plate, seized his chance. Using all his strength, he pried open the cyborg's armor, exposing his vulnerable gutsack. Enraged, Grievous hurled Kenobi aside, prepared to finish him with an electro staff. However, before Grievous could finish him, Kenobi summoned the blaster on the floor with the Force. Kenobi aimed and fired multiple shots. They didn't miss. They directly hit Grievous's exposed organs. The general staggered back, a metallic shriek twisting into a horrifying death cry. His body ignited from within, flames bursting from his eye sockets as the last remnants of his organic self were incinerated. His lifeless body collapsed. The greatest Jedi killer and single biggest threat to the Republic was finally dead. Epilogue. With Grievous dead, the Separatist forces on Utapau fell into chaos. Without their supreme commander, the droid army lost its coordination, allowing the Republic to quickly overwhelm the remaining CIS forces. Meanwhile, on Mustafar, the Separatist Council awaited their fate, unaware that Sidious had already planned their execution at the hands of his new apprentice, Darth Vader. Back on Coruscant, the Jedi Council received news of Grievous's demise. While they celebrated what seemed to be the end of the war, they failed to realize that Palpatine's true plan was already in motion. Just like Grievous, all of them had been set up and been part of a grand plan. Just like Grievous, they were all going to die. If Grievous had been able to see the destruction of the Jedi Order, he certainly would have had a smile under his blank mask. His wish did come true in the end.